5 minutes or less. Mail it at the post office or drop it off at a voting center. But vote. And if you can't find your ballot or you don't want to mail it, you can find your closest voting center at the website of your local county registrar of voters. If you're not registered to vote, you can still vote too. It's not too late. You can go to your local registrar of voters. Register and vote provisionally. You can register today and vote today. If you lost or threw your ballot out by accident, you can get another ballot at your local voting center or your local county registrar of voters. In San Bernardino County, you can find your registrar of voters at sbcountyelections.com. That's sbcountyelections.com. In Riverside County at voteinfo.net. That's voteinfo.net. Or for more info, you can check the California Secretary of State's website at sos.ca.gov. That's sos.ca.gov. Vote for those who sacrificed. Vote for the ones you love today and those you will know and love tomorrow. So vote. Vote by today, Tuesday, March 5th at 8 p.m. It's easy. And that's the latest from the KCAA Community Calendar.
Show, and I'd like to give a thanks and shout out to the sponsors of today's episode. So before we get started, I have a incredible free masterclass that is going on now from my good friends and sponsors of this episode, fixhormones.com. And so it's what every woman needs to know about hormone restoration. How to restore your hormones to end hot flashes, mood swings, hormonal weight gain, and feel like yourself again without ever setting foot in a doctor's office or changing your daily routine. So if this described you at all, this is a masterclass for you, and it is free. So in this 60-minute masterclass, you will learn how to know exactly what's causing you to age rapidly, feel tired, fat, old, or moody, even though your doctor says it's normal for your age and all your tests are coming back normal. You'll also learn the two big reasons many doctors are unwilling to prescribe hormone restoration and what they aren't telling you about your hormones. Next, you're going to learn the huge difference between hormone replacement therapy, HRT, bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, BHRT, and natural hormone therapy. And you will also learn how to get a custom hormone balancing prescription to reverse aging, keep weight off, enhance energy, and put an end to perimenopause and menopause symptoms for good. So again, thank you to our sponsors, and if you want to join the free masterclass and claim your spot now, go to Fix Hormones, fixhormones.com.
Are you ready for a reboot? Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. History reminds us those hit hardest often become the change makers. This year, we've all hit crazy economic, social, and emotional rock bottoms. We all get knocked down. Something hits globally, locally, personally. It affects our health, finances, our relationships. We have to recreate a business or career. Each show, Sheila and her special guest will be sharing their reboot stories, guiding you with real solutions to upgrade and up-level emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. Here on NBC's KCAA Radio. If you're ready to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and bra straps, enjoy a listen. Here's Sheila.
Welcome to the Sheila Mac Show, reality at its finest. Here we have real people sharing real stories and actionable steps to help you reinvent, rebuild, and reboot your business and personal life on your terms. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and today we have special guest Tom Duffy. Tom is a transformative figure in the field of prison reform. From 1992 to 2007, Tom was the founder and executive director of the Prison Smart Foundation. Tom modified the Sky Breath program to be taught to incarcerated individuals. He played a crucial role in the national expansion of the foundation and professionally worked with some of America's most violent 707B offenders. In recognition of his groundbreaking work, Tom was invited in 2001 by Nelson Mandela's bodyguard to train a team of 12 instructors to expand the Prison Smart to the entire South African prison system using the same tools that has been so successful in the US. Today, the program is active in over 118 countries, bringing hope and healing to thousands of incarcerated individuals around the world. Tom has a new book, The Prison Smart Diaries, chronicles his remarkable recovery from a life of addiction and crime to meeting his guru that sent him to jail to serve a life of service without any chance of parole. The book is a testament to the power of faith, compassion, and service. Tom had a caseload of over 5,000 clients. Wow. Well, welcome to the show, Tom.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And I always start off by asking the guests to share about a time in your business or personal life where you experienced a tough situation and how you got back on track.
Uh, there's so many of the stories. One of the main ones was the first time that I had ever gotten permission to go into a jail. I got a superintendent that accidentally got my memo from his boss, the sheriff, put onto the top of the list. So the sheriff's secretary called him, and he thought it was a really important meeting. So I was not prepared for that to happen at all. And I got a phone call from him directly, and he said, "Come on in, I'll give you 10 minutes." And well, we sat down, and within a few minutes, the conversation turned into, can you give me your social security number? And I went back, I gave him my social security number. He turned around and typed it into a computer. And all of a sudden the fax machine started spitting out 12 and 15 pages of information. He reaches over, grabs it, and he goes, "Well, you've had an interesting life. What's up with this stolen stereo you got tied up in?"
Oh.
And so then, I'm sitting there thinking I'm doing my presentation. And while he's looking through the pages, he's asking me all these questions. And I started talking about a program that never was.
Mm,
I hadn't done a program yet. I just
wow.
had I just had the program that I had been, you know, practicing, the Sudarshan Kriya, the Sky meditation program, and I had a basic idea of how it might unfold. But as I was telling him this, he said, "Wow, it sounds really interesting." And then he goes, "Hold on a minute." He gets on the phone and he calls up he calls up his secretary and says, "Send me in chief of security, health and human services, and two escorts." And I'm like, "Oh my God, my fax machine that I was watching might have spit out some pages." And so these guys came in and they said, "Take Duffy down to E section." And I'm like, "Oh, what? Take me down and show him booking, like I'm going to get a tour." So I was absolutely terrified. So I got completely derailed emotionally. And I'm thinking, well, do I run out the door because something happened from some drug deal that I didn't know about, and some, whatever. And what ended up happening was we went down, they took my mugshot, and they said, "What do you want it to say?" And I said, "Oh, it's just kind of," I thought to myself, "Oh, this is just a little like tour." And
Yeah.
so they brought me into the section. The guards ran down the hallway with their batons and wrapped all the bunks with their batons and woke these guys up that were sleeping. And I was totally horrified, because now I was actually being put into a situation of having to teach this program that never was.
Mm,
I was bullshitting my way on the front end with the superintendent, and I was making the outline in my head
right.
live. So I was immediately forced to go inward and absolutely have a dedicated idea of how I was going to make it out. So it really boils down to faith. I get in there, and the guards and the superintendent are standing behind me, and it's quite a visual presentation to have all these cops and the chief of security, head of health and human services. And I thought that they were standing behind me. I heard a door close, and I started talking to these inmates. I didn't want to break eye contact with them at all. I was like
Mm,
totally terrified. I was nauseous. I was wanting to faint. I wanted to go to the bathroom immediately. My system was in total freak out, and I'd never been in a jail before. And
mm,
so at the turning point was, I said, "Yeah, Mr. Fredericks and his staff are going to give me an opportunity to come down here and teach a program." And one of the guys, they start going like this. They're going, "What are you talking about?" And I turned around and they weren't there. So the turning point was, I immediately got my self-confidence in the moment, and realized I had no one else to fall back on but myself.
Mm.
And I just blurted out probably one of the best introductions to a program that never was to this whole group. And then the second turning point was I realized I was absolutely terrified. So I went over to this table and I turned my back to the group and I said, "Everyone, come over here, put your name down, and you'll be on the list for the first program that we do here." And so I had to just sort of completely let go of the total terror that I felt and realize that I had to fall into faith. And
Mhm.
in that moment, something just exploded inside of myself. And it was like God said, this is your turf. This is where you do your best. This is where you shine. And from that day forward, that was 1992. Um, the program just took off, and so that was my turning point, falling into faith.
That's incredible.
Long-winded, but
I
that's it.
love it. It's beautiful. Yeah, sometimes things flow through us when we're put on the spot like that, and it's exactly right. You can't memorize for something like that.
No.
It has to just show up. Yeah, I love that. That is incredible. And so you were really guided in some way or form to do this work. And tell me, when I was reading your bio, there was section 7013B.
Oh,
What level of
707B.
that? What did that mean?
Well, in the judicial system, incarcerated individuals are in different classifications. The most violent are called 707B offenders.
Oh wow.
So a 707B offender might be sitting there and have, if they have access to a pencil, and they
Mm.
feel anger, and they don't even understand why, but they'll just stick you in the eye with it.
Oh yeah.
They're very violent,
Oh.
extremely violent. And so the kids, the primary kids that I worked with LA Probation at the VAP program, the Violence Alternative Program, were LA Probation's most violent gang members, all from rival gangs.
Mm.
And I was the anger management. That well, I don't, I don't know how I got the title, but the superintendent of the entire facility wrote me a recommendation letter and listed me as anger management specialist.
Wow.
And I was like, well, if that's what I am, then that's what I am. So from that point on, everyone referred to me as, the psych staff would come over and go, "Oh, so you're the anger management specialist." They never asked where did I go to college, what
Mhm.
degree do I have, where'd you get your doctrine, I'm like, they just never asked. They just said, "Can you come to my session on Saturday? I need someone to do some breathing." So these kids that I worked with were the most violent, and I ended up with them. I'll be real quick. I ended up with them by mistake because every facility that I ever went into, I always put myself on the line integrity wise. And I said, "Look, give me your most violent, most dangerous, hard to handle individuals. And if you don't see a result in the first 45 minutes, I'll leave and you'll never see me again."
Right.
And from 91 to 2007, I never ever was turned away from a facility. And so when we made that pitch to LA Probation, they turned around and took me up on it. They said,
Mhm.
"Well, Bill Richardson over here is in charge of Camp Smith out in Challenger Memorial Youth Center." They kind of fed me to the lions. They thought it was going to be hell on wheels. Um, and I had them all in my hip pocket. It was perfect.
Yes. Wow. That does sound incredible. So then how old were these people that you were working with? You said kids, so like teens to 20s or
Yeah, the kids that in the last 5 years of my work, 2000 through 2006 into seven, um, those kids could be anywhere from. I had one kid that was probably like 13
Mhm.
until they're about somewhere in the area of 18, uh, give or take. Then they transition into the adult system if they're still
Yeah.
incarcerated.
Yes. Yes.
They were young, and it was just so amazing for me to work with those kids. I just to this day I have some of their audio. I could even play it for you if you wanted to, but
Oh, that's
it's
beautiful.
pretty cool to hear them.
Yeah, I love that. That is incredible. Yes, and I'm sitting here. This was a beautiful connection. I actually interviewed um, a group, a couple of people from the Sky Breath.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started my show, I think 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, they were on the show, and we just connected again, and you showed up, and I love that. And I have to be honest, I was one of those kids that was in one of those camps.
Wow.
So I went to St. Catherine's, and I was not supposed to be there. I was emancipating at 15 from foster care.
Wow.
And I was sent to, well, they gave me a choice. The foster parents I was with got divorced, and they gave me a choice of going to the hall or going to camp. And in my mind, camp sounded pretty fun. And I didn't know. And so I got to camp, and I got to be with some of the kids that have taken an eye out or killed somebody or hurt someone or this and that. And I also felt very guided. They ended up losing my file, and I was supposed to be gone in 2 weeks out of the system and emancipated. And for 6 months, I got to be in that environment, and it was it was really like I felt I needed to be there. It brought me a lot of compassion. There were the different gangs, and they would put them together. And it was,
Yeah.
and we walk in lines, and I mean it was like a prison camp,
Oh my
and
God.
we did all that. And I got to see who those people, those kids really were, from a very different perspective, because I was one of them. So I got to hear the secrets and the reasons, and hear the heart and what was causing a lot of the situation. And it was really a beautiful time. I wasn't really angry. I just felt like it was the way it was supposed to be. Maybe I was protected for being in there or needed that experience, but it's something that unless you've been in that type of an environment, you don't get what that's like. I had to learn the vocabulary. I had to do certain things to fit in. But it was definitely an interesting experience that has changed my perspective on uh, categorizing anyone for something they've done in one part of their life, because you see the whole person.
Well, a lot of people don't realize, and I covered a little bit in the book, but one of the things that I would, when I would I keynote spoke at many organizations, National Crime Prevention Conference 3 years in a row, American Jail Association, talked with, a variety of different individuals, and it always gives them whiplash when I say what I'm about to say. And it's really fascinating because the most powerful, influential people on the planet were criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And so you let that hang for a few minutes, few seconds, and they look at you and go, "What are you talking about?" We go, "Well, Jesus Christ was incarcerated by the Roman Empire, tortured to death on a torture device.
Mm-hmm.
The cross was not a pleasant way to die, but to the Roman Empire, he was a criminal." You go all through history. There's many Indian saints, Christian saints that followed. Um, More modern day people, Nelson Mandela,
Yeah.
phenomenal individual,
Yes.
criminal, became the president of his country.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King, more recent, total, in the eyes of many people in government, he was a trouble. He was a problem, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And the list goes on and on and on. There's just so many examples of people that were extremely, in many of the actors that we know today. Um, I don't want to name them just in case there's some sort of, you're not allowed to say his name without permission. But,
Right.
I met a few, many famous people, and there's so many of them, like Robert Downey Jr. I was in Twin Towers teaching a course when he was being held. He had gotten busted for one of his cocaine charges, and
Mm-hmm.
I walked by a room that he was in. I didn't go in. You couldn't get close to him to say hi, but Twin Towers is a big facility in downtown LA,
Mm-hmm.
and many rappers that are very successful and very influential with America's youth. They're great people. A lot of them saw a lot of really big stuff, and it's when you say stuff like that to people, their minds start to shift a little bit about, because they always say, "What the heck? Why did you want to work with criminals? What's the big deal? These people are monsters. Leave them alone. Let them rot in jail." And they would make these things, and I'd say to them, I'd say, "Okay, you want to hurt them, right? You want to punish them. You believe they should be punished, right?" And they say, "Yeah." And I go, "Just close your eyes for a moment. If you don't feel safe about closing your eyes, then just keep your eyes open and think of a person that you cannot accept.
Mhm.
Now think of a person that you can accept, that you love a lot. How did you feel when you did? I'm doing this very fast. I'm not doing it like a process.
Yeah.
This would take a minute or two, but because of the speed of a podcast, and you ask them, well, genuinely answer the question. When you thought of the person you could not accept, how did you feel? And they'll say, well, I felt heat. My I saw myself strangling them, and I just wanted to see them fall off a bridge and watch their head break, And I
Mm.
go, okay. And how did you feel when you thought about the person that you could love and accept? And they just explain all those beautiful words of love, acceptance, and peace. And I go, so who do you think gets hurt when you can't accept a person? And then they it hits them. They go, who got hurt when you thought of the good person and the bad person? Who got hurt in that moment? And they go, I did. And I
Mhm.
go, don't you realize that when you harbor that kind of a feeling, you're no different than the criminal that feels that he has to do something terrible to another person because of their anger and stress. So when you have that same anger and stress, now you know at a small, easy, smooth level through an exercise what might possibly be going through the mind of a person that's incarcerated. In that moment, they just didn't know how to manage that stress and they exploded with a horrific. There's no excuse for criminal activity. Don't ever think that I'm defending criminals, because I'm not, never did. I always told them, you screwed up, but here's why you screwed up. And here's something you can do about not screwing up again. That was what I would do. So
Mhm.
I got a little chatty there, sorry.
No, that's I love that. And yeah, we're not in any rush, so you can take your time. I think that it just one person or one message can change an entire person's life, their trajectory entirely. And so just to have that, and it comes from different people, places, and ways, and I think it's just beautiful that you all of a sudden got to do this program that showed up through you, and for all those people. I think that's beautiful. I'd love to understand, like, what is it like when you first start a group, or how does the process work, from the beginning to the end? Is it so many months or weeks, or what does that look like, and what type of transformations have you seen with the programs that you've created with the Prison Smart?
Well, it's like I always use the terminology of a wedge, like this. Like I always, when I would bring a group of instructors that I was training, or if I did a teacher training, I would always say, "Look, your first few courses are going to be hell on wheels."
Mm.
And the first one is like a wedge. You go in and you jam into this circle, this ball, and it's a fight and it's a fight. And then you teach another course, and then the wedge goes a little further. You teach another course, the energy builds, it gets a little bigger. And then after 3 or 4 courses, it makes this circle that goes like this. And for some reason, it becomes very supportive. So in that process of wedging, basically the first stages are, there's a lot of kind of a wolf mentality, animalistic brainstem kind of mindset where people are sussing each other out. So you
Mm.
walk in, first of all, you're a white person,
Mm.
and a majority of them are either Latino. I mean, I worked with a lot of, I mean, there's actually a lot more white people in jail than there is Latinos, but and African Americans, believe it or not. When you look at the FBI, Federal Bureau of Prisons, we have way more white people in jail than black people. There's an illusion that all the black people are criminals and that's who fills the jails. It's not the case. But there's you walk in and you have to suss them out. So I came up with a talk called Apples in a Basket. And I just one day, just it popped in my head. I saw that the room was like a basket of apples. I said, look, my name's Tom. You don't know me from, and I would cuss. I
Yeah.
say cuss words because I talk their language. And I go, you don't know me from jack shit. And I said, and I don't know you for jack shit. And I said, but if we can look at each other like a basket of apples, there's walls, the basket. We can't go anywhere. We're all stuck in this bowl together. And I said, but if you look around the room, and I said, go ahead and look around the room. We don't let them it's called rubbernecking. So you always want to keep a kid's heads forward. But I said, go ahead, you have my permission to look around the room. I said, what do you see? And they all look, and I go, you see people of different races, right? Over there, you got an African American kid. Over here, you got a Mexican kid. Over here, you got a guy from Cuba. And I said, each person looks different. And what about the shapes? Is everybody the same shape? They go, no. I said, is everybody the same color? No. I said, is your homie the same color as you? You got the same skin tone? No. And I go, well, it's like apples in a basket. And if you look at an apple in a basket, especially when you look up at me, do I look like you? No. I'm this guy in a fancy suit. I'm got this big executive director position. I sound like somebody important. I'm not any more important than you. I said, we're all in this together. And if you look at everyone, it's like everyone's got a different skin, and an apple has a different skin. But on that apple is a very thin layer that separates everyone from everyone else. Some apples have little cuts, some apples have bullet holes, some apples have bruises, and some apples are all pretty and look like Miss Calamito, my wife that I was teaching with at the time, and she was knockout gorgeous. And I said, you know, some apples are really pretty, some apples are not. And I said, so realize that everyone is like an apple in a basket. Underneath that thin layer of skin is a lot of sweet fruit. And in the center of that are two seeds, one of love and one of fear. And I said, if you can look at me through the eyes of love and not through the eyes of fear, at the end of this course, we can bake a great big apple pie and have a party. And I said, I can't bring an apple pie in because I'd have to have a knife, and they won't let me bring a knife, so I'll bring a box of donuts. How's that sound? And then they all laugh. And then, you know, you pretty much won them over a little bit by them all realizing, first of all, that we're really not that different. Right from the get-go, the first thing I say to them is the apples in the basket course talk. And then after that, it's a matter of picking who's going to challenge you. So generally, the troublemaker is going to be in the back of the room. And so I'll often immediately go, I'll pull the staff over if I'm not comfortable with that particular group, because whenever you move a group, it has to be done very controlled. And so I'd have the staff go, okay, the first half of the course, everybody was sitting in a square. I said, the first half, go over to the right-hand side of the room. They would go over, get in formation. I go, now everybody in the back, move to the front. And they freak out. And you look to see who's freaking out the most. That's your troublemaker. So then he comes up and he starts body language and all this. He slopes down, and I go, don't slope down. So anyways, it's a process that you have to go through. But once you win over the top dog in the room, the alpha male or female, and then you can win over the group, because they don't want to look bad up against the person that is the toughest.
Yeah.
And so after they get over those layers or sheaths, you know, it's like a lamp and putting cloths over it. When they first come in, there's a whole bunch of cloths over the lamp. But with each sheath or layer of fabric that you take off, the light starts getting brighter and brighter, and the person starts shining through. And once you get them into that position, they feel the love within themselves, and there's that natural connection. And I always have to be very clear that love does not mean sex. Love just means who you are, how you're wired. And I tell them, you're all wired for love. You're not wired for fear. That's why fear makes you so unhappy. But when you feel, you know, you see your little baby or your auntie comes to visit, or you go to, you know, someone does a nice thing for you, you feel that love. And so, you know, you're all feeling joy right now. You're feeling who you are. You're made up of a substance called love. You're not made up of a substance called fear. And so that's sort of how the beginning of a program usually starts. And then it's just maintenance and applying discipline. Because to a juvenile, even actually most of us, to be honest with you, are still operating from a very juvenile-based memory of, you know, what we learned as children. That's what makes us who we are as adults. And so the kids, to a kid, discipline means love, means that you care about them. And so the more discipline you show, the safer they feel, and the more willing they are to participate.
Yes.
And then as far as the transformations that I've seen, it's mind-boggling. Generally, the most men are conditioned in this world to not show emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always tell an expression of emotion, usually through different behavior. Often, when people are wanting to face off with you, it comes out in complaining. Um, but a lot of them, you can see them. They'll do silly things like they'll start going like this,
Oh,
and they'll go, that pepper spray they sprayed in here last week when there was a fight, making my eye burn.
right.
And then you sit and you go, no, you don't want to take a position of that's not why your eyes are burnt. You don't say that. You just
Mm-hmm.
sit back and go,
Yeah.
he's tapping in. So in the transformations, it's just been mind-boggling because most people think it's a big deal and it's going to be really hard for a criminal to find the softness in their heart. But it's actually really easy because the negativities, the negative things about us are like the skin of the apple. They're very thin and fragile.
Yeah.
That's why people that are very angry and bullies, you look at them and you go, they're such fragile, delicate people. They're
Mm,
very thin skinned,
right.
like the skin of an apple. So it doesn't take much time or effort at all to peel that illusion away. And like we often in the Art of Living courses that we teach publicly, we often talk about how if somebody gives you 10 positive compliments and then one negative, what do you go to bed sleeping? What do you go to bed thinking about at night? The one negative, but you've got 10 positives. And
Mm,
so, what I often would say in reference to the work in the jails with criminals is that you have to realize that how people perceive themselves is often based on that very one negative that they picked up about themselves. I'm I'm not loved is usually the main one.
mm,
You didn't care about me. You weren't there when I needed you. And from there, it's a big deal, but it's actually very fragile and very thin and very easy to get through. And the breath is the main tool that we would use
mm-hmm.
to bring the awareness onto the truth that you are really big
Mm-hmm.
energetically. You're huge. I mean, you're beyond anything you can imagine. So I'm babbling. I'm sorry.
No, I love that.
I get going and I don't
I hear
really.
where you're going, and I love that. It sounds incredible, and it is. There's a certain way that you have to be in that type of an environment in order to survive.
You have
And,
to believe it yourself.
yeah, and you have to be very tough, and that may not be who you are. So to be able to get to the heart of who these young adults really are is an incredible journey, and it's very freeing and helpful. And they still have to be a certain way in order to be safe until they're out on the outs, right? And so that there is definitely that yeah, it takes a minute. And gosh, when you have that level of trust, and when you get to that part of your program, it changes how these people are able to relate with each other, I believe, and they must have more feelings of safety. Thank you for our sponsor today of this episode. And just to learn a little bit more about our sponsor, are you a startup founder struggling to get your pitch deck noticed by investors? Do you spend endless hours tweaking and revising only to see lackluster results? It's time to take your pitch to the next level with How Good Is My Pitch Deck by Keen Angle. Keen and his team at Story Pitch Decks have helped raise hundreds of millions of dollars in early stage funding at a rate 40 times higher than the industry average. Investors are looking for promising startups that are well prepared and have a compelling pitch. With Keen's proven strategies and actionable frameworks, you'll learn how to evaluate how compelling your startup's story is, mitigate your pitch's biggest weaknesses, ideally position your startup within any industry, and much more. You'll also gain a deeper understanding of what investors are looking for and how to effectively communicate your unique value proposition. Plus, this book includes a free digital companion kit with full length example pitch decks and cheat sheets. Head to Amazon and search for How Good is My Pitch Deck to get your copy today. Just overall, because then there's some trust that happens. You can trust the person next to you a little bit more because you've gone through this whole experience together. So that sounds really magical.
And I think that, to survive in, a correctional facility, I know that as soon as they leave my class, they have to put their facade on.
Yeah.
I watch them walking around in the class, and then I watch them doing their little jigs. They got these little hops that they do and skips, and they roll a certain way, and
Right?
and so I realize that they have to do that to show people that haven't taken the course that they're so I get that they had to put on the fake face, but
Yes.
yeah, it's a tough place. It's a tough place, but there's a lot of love and amazing magic in there when you bring light into the darkest place. They say in the East that when you light a candle in a dark room, the essence of darkness is never the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only hope that I've ever, kept, because, I know a majority of the kids that I worked with in LA, probably about 1,800 out there, over half of them are dead,
Yeah.
because the gang life is, a lot of people on the outside looking in think, oh, these kids just got nothing to do, so they get into a gang and they go and do bad things. There is so much more to the inner city gang world. It's fascinating because it's very family cultural. The uncles, the fathers, the grandparents, even many of them have been in the culture of gang, a gang culture. And so for them, it's like telling an Italian not to eat spaghetti and meatballs anymore.
Yeah.
To them, this is huge. This is what my family does, and
Mm.
there's a lot of misunderstandings about the gang culture in this country. I don't think most people have a clue. But
Yes. And it takes a lot, and a lot of people that leave a gang um, and get away from it are able to then go back and lead some of the other people out of that. That's a prison in and of itself. You might not be behind bars or in a camp, but it's still in its own way very hard to change that whole mindset and make a difference in life. So that's something that's pretty cool that you're able to do that. I think that's magical. Now I'd love to hear about your book.
okay. Well, the book was started back in the mid '90s. I would go to events and talk to groups, and there were the interest was fascinating. There was a email list that Art of Living was distributing. Um, it was called the Satsang, and it went all over the world. And
Mm.
I had my own like blog before blogs were blog, or email marketing was even around. I had a thing called Gang, the Change Gang instead of the Chain Gang, and
Mhm.
I would write daily,
Mm.
these stories, and so people around the world responded. And when I traveled internationally, people would always tell me these stories. I remember reading those emails you wrote. They were
Mhm.
just unbelievable. The spelling was terrible, but the story was unbelievable. And so people got really inspired. And a dear friend that started the Prison Smart program with me, Judy Clark, she's since passed away. She and I would sit and tell these stories, and generally people would just cry. They would always, their hearts would open hearing these stories of transformation. And
Yeah.
so she started the book, and um, it kind of progressed over the years, and it never been finished. Judy had some health issues. My wife had passed away from cancer. I had all these challenges with what Prison Smart was doing. So the book kind of went into this like limbo state for a long time. and and so the book basically, I wanted to put something together that was telling a story of of, of transformation. Um, I was involved in low end, to a certain extent, criminal activity, burglaries, drug trafficking. I eventually got into connections with people that were higher up. I got to be careful what I say. And then I had a connection, is all I can say about the person that I had in Boston who had organized crime connections. And I was bringing stolen goods, trading them for drugs there. And so that story kind of lets people know that, hey, I was in it to a certain extent, for maybe 5 or 6 years of my juvenile life and got pretty deep. Lucky to be alive, I think. Many of my friends are dead that were involved in a lot of that stuff.
Mhm.
And so the book, Prison Smart Diaries, is sort of like, it kind of tells the story from beginning to end of, where the journey went and how it went and got signed over to the International Association of Human Values, the largest NGO working with the United Nations. It's a sister organization of the Art of Living. And they expanded it off into its international existence. And like,
Mm.
now it's all over the place. And so the book kind of documents that. And so my goal of the Prison Smart Diaries is to share that story. I made it a digital book first because within the book are QR codes on different pages. And as you're reading the book, you can take your phone and scan the QR code, and it'll take you to a private YouTube page that I have
I love
that
that.
you
Yeah.
can only get to it through the link, and
Mm.
it plays the video of that part of the book.
Nice.
So the book kind of digitally becomes alive,
Yeah.
and if I could make it so that within the digital book a little viewer would pop up in the bottom, that would be great. But yeah,
No.
so that's the Prison Smart Diaries, and it ties in with this program I'm starting called Streetlights 2.0, which
Mm.
is basically I want to be able to make prison guards, gang members, and people on the street gurus.
Mm.
I want them to be able to take a phone and go, "Hey, watch this, homie. I'm going to show you how to breathe." You know, and there'll be a class or a session there that people can purchase. I'll give it to them if they contact me and they're in a situation, and no one will not get it because of money. But it did cost money to create. I
Right.
had to host it. I had to create a website.
Mhm.
Website is up there, streetlights2.com. Um, it basically is a downloadable program that people will be able to play. I have this goal and vision that prison guards could sit in a room without me having to travel around the country like I did before. And all the money that was spent in hotel rooms and rental cars and meals and hassles of meetings, it's just like, wow, just push and play on a phone or an iPad and have a prison guard set up a laptop in a room and go, hey, here's the class, and bam, have
Mm.
it just start playing. So
Mm.
that's my goal, is to have the book promote Streetlights program and document the work that I did. It needs a voice, so I gave
Mm.
it one.
That's incredible. Now, how did you change? What was the thing that came into your life, or the moment? Was it a moment where you stopped doing the crime things like when you were a kid and you got into those things you mentioned? What was the change for you?
Well, I loved getting high, and that was one of the main things. And when I started the Sudarshan Kriya as a practice, and I met Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, I realized within less than a year, my addiction was gone, over. And it wasn't over because of some sort of miraculous thing. It's always, associated with a person wanting to make a choice. I'm going to be sober. And I got so high off of the Sudarshan Kriya that when I smoked weed, it
Mm.
was so less.
Yeah.
When I went into a party and snorted a half a gram of coke. I was like, this is not fun. I wake up in the morning, do my 3-stage breathing, bellows breath, chant Om 3 times, circles of breath, and I'd come out and I was like, man, this is like tripping, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd be like so trippy, like this is like the best high in the world. So somehow in my brain, there was a connection that I want to get high. I don't want to ever change that, but I want to be high naturally. And making that decision and realizing that I could substitute cocaine and weed with breath,
Yeah.
it totally blew my mind. And
Oh,
then, yeah, and then I just started seeing the results of that, and the result of being kind and sweet and loving and understanding and empathetic to myself. And then service was probably the next big tool, because when we think about ourselves, we're constantly thinking about what about me? What about me? When we're depressed, the process in the brain is what about me? What about
mm,
me?
mm.
Look what happened to me. Look what I did. And the brain dwells and becomes very, very depressed. It's a technique for becoming depressed. Just
Yeah.
constantly think, what about me? What about me? What about me? But then when you think about others and you come into service, then the energy stops going inward in the what about me, and it goes, what about you? What
Right.
about that homeless person? What
Mhm.
about that prison? What about, and that's expansion. So, combination of getting high naturally on the breath, and I keep all those drugs that I used to take. I've got a little surplus in my house. I've got a
Mm.
medical kit. I've got antibiotics. I've got the pain meds. I've got barbiturates in the house. I've got somewhere around here, I keep a little container pot, because when I feel the craving, I stop and sniff it, and then I put it down and I go, "What do you want? You want that again, or do you want this?" And
Mm.
it's like it's just what I do. I don't recommend anyone else to do it, because
Right.
some people might just go, "Oh, I'll smoke a pound of weed."
But yeah.
No, but I guess my point for saying it is that it's important to keep yourself in check,
Mhm.
and to realize that truth is what matters,
Right.
that you are wired to be high beyond any drug or alcohol. And it's just so true. So I think those were the kind of the 2 to 3 major steps that,
Wow.
it turned.
Well, I was really blessed. I left home when I was 10. My mother like had me leave with abuse and this and that going on with her parents. And so I left and I went with friends and on the streets and the first so I'm this little kid with older kids because I needed places to stay at night.
Mm.
And the first introduction I had to drugs was a young girl that I barely knew. I was still going to school full time. She took me out with friends and she smoked some kind of something like with PCP.
Angel dust.
Yeah, yeah, remember that? And I didn't know how to inhale.
Terrible.
Like I
Ugh.
literally was 10 and a half maybe. So I had no idea and I didn't want to look stupid and I was like, "No, I'm good. I'm going to go over here." And I tried to be real cool about it. And she overdosed, but she survived that
Wow.
night and her mother was so mad at me and I was like, "I don't even know what that is. Like I have no idea what's going on." Oh, her mom blamed me. But she lived. And that was like that experience literally was like I'm not doing that. And I mean I don't do the ayahuasca, none, I don't care what they call it, it's a drug. And I don't, no judgment, but it's just nothing I really got into because of that experience. And I think that might have been source, universe, God, whatever you want to say, just what, we're going to show you that this is not the road to take. So I'd love to learn where and how people that might be interested can get your book, as well as how, if they're interested, maybe they have a program or they're working with people that are in the system,
Hmm.
and they want to have Sky Breath and this program or something similar come in and help them. How can they connect with you on all that?
Well, on a if why don't we look at it as like a part A, part B.
Okay.
So part A is the Tom Duffy book, and part of that is the Streetlights program, which is nothing proprietary to Art of Living. It's stuff that's you can actually just find a lot of it on YouTube, but it's put into a little packet for people, and that's purchasable. Is that a word?
Yeah.
You're able to purchase it. I had a
Right.
kid once say, how was the program? He said, it's relaxable.
Oh, I like that. There you
So
go.
sometimes I say purchasable, and I think purchasable. But anyways, so the part A would be the purchasing the book for sure. You go to Amazon.com and do a search for the Prison Smart Diaries. It'll
Mm-hmm.
pop right up. You purchase it. You don't need a Kindle to read it. You can download the app. If someone's in a facility and they'd like a sort of push and play, easy to go program, the streetlights2.com website, it's able to be purchased and downloaded from Thinkific, which is the platform that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that part B would be if you want Sky Breath brought into your facility more in depth, then you contact the Art of Living has the prison program. They're calling it the prison program now, which is basically the extension of Prison Smart that I had started in North America.
Yeah.
And it's usually on the IAHV website. IAHV, I think it's .org. And there's links on there for programs that International Association for Human Values oversees. And I'm currently on staff with the Project Welcome Home Troops program, working with veterans.
Nice.
So I do that weekly, and that's sort of my ongoing connection and blessing from my time with Art of Living. I just love working with the veterans now.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a once we signed over Prison Smart that I had done in 2007 after Terry had passed away, I was wiped out. My wife died of cancer.
Yeah.
I needed to recharge, regroup, just sort of, I was too wiped out energetically, emotionally to
Yeah.
do what we call taking the seat, being a teacher. And so we signed it over, handed over the checking account, handed them a whole bunch of money, handed them all the success, and now it's just one big river. It was never really separate anyways, but it's one big river of success. And so for the larger programs, IAHV has Gabriella Savries, I think is her last name. Gabriella is overseeing that program for
Mm-hmm.
them, and they can contact about funding and doing the larger program, and so it's pretty exciting. So
That's beautiful. Yes. That's incredible. Well, thank you, Tom. And I always end the show with a question. So, my question for you, what would you do if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self? Maybe that one that was going down some interesting roads. What would you tell the younger you?
don't change a thing, because all, it was like a yeah. I would just say don't change a thing, because all that experience that I had of pain and suffering blossomed all the love and compassion that
Yeah.
made Prison Smart what it became, and it's
Hmm.
huge. It's
Yes.
a giant program.
Incredible. I love that. Well, thank you again for being a guest on the show. And for those tuning in, we'll be back after these messages. Thank you again, Tom.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Okay. If you are just tuning in, this is NBC's Sheila Mac Show here on KCAA Radio, the station that leaves no listener behind. I'm your host, Sheila Mac, and I have some news for you. Yes, you. I'm celebrating my third year now on the station and will be expanding the show to a global network as well. You may now find the Sheila Mac Show on all major podcasting channels, and if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, all the episodes are now available for viewing there as well. And I'm asking you for a quick favor. If you like the show, please help support the spread of this reboot channel on YouTube as well. My goal is to help as many people as possible through our interesting times to rebuild, reinvent, and reboot your business and personal life. I also wanted to share a little bit more about how I got here. what I do now, and how designing a business career and life on your terms is more than possible at any age or stage in life. I am an enterprisingly forward thinking consultant, show host, and best selling author. But how did I get here? Well, I began my career as an entrepreneur and property investment strategist back when I was 23 years young, when I boldly quit my government job with NASA JPL to open my first of 5 large gift stores while also starting to invest in property. I got to work with some of the world's most loved companies, such as negotiations on leases with Warner Brothers and winning trips to London as the top selling Crabtree and Evelyn provider in the U.S. for multiple years. My stores were built on heart as I gave back to the community I came from. So now, some of you know this and some of you don't know this, but as a young girl with parents who were not well enough to care for me, I was homeless at age 10, then in foster care, where it was really hard to get a job while in the system. I finally emancipated at the age of 15 to start college early. While running my stores, I worked with a government program. Back then, it was called Job Training Partnership Act, making my stores an open source training site where close to 200 at risk youth started their careers. Yes, I began my career helping business leaders and working professionals to design a life they love where they can have success in their careers and get to the business of life. See, a funny thing happened along the way. When I first opened my gift store, it was kind of crazy because I was this young upstart. That's what a lot of the store owners called me. My first store